Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you and introduce briefly about seminar series, especially for new guests and the moderator. Inspired by Raul Kasho and other discourses, as well as with innovations in Bhutan, the Center for Bhutan and GNH Studies is hosting this seminar series on the use of artificial intelligence and innovation solutions to support ethical and good governance. Eminent speakers from around the globe will share the positive roles that technology and artificial intelligence can play. Please check the CBS website or Facebook for details of upcoming talks on this and other topics, and be sure to register so you can join by Zoom, where you have the opportunity to interact directly. I'm delighted to introduce our moderator for this session, who will in turn introduce the keynote speaker. Our moderator today is Lungten Gyatso. He served as the president of College of Language and Culture Studies in Tongsa. Currently, he teaches universal human values, personal transformations, and Buddhism in the college. He's also an executive faculty of the Royal Institute of Governance and Strategic Studies in Phuntsholing, and a visiting faculty of Kathmandu University in Nepal. He co-authored The Light of Life, English Tsongkha Dictionary, Tsongkha English Dictionary, and has published several articles on philosophy, language, well-being, and culture. He has a master's degree in Buddhist studies and an additional master's degree in Sanskrit literature. His primary research interest is well-being and spirituality. Our moderator may have to leave by 3 p.m., but the event will continue a little past 3. Over to you, Lungten. Lungten, you have muted. Can you please unmute? Sorry.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Tsewang, for that introduction. I would like to welcome everybody to the third Shichenkar Virtual Seminar Initiative on Artificial Intelligence, and today's seminar titled Preserving the Past and Building the Future, the Role of Digital Solutions in Preserving Ancient Buddhist Texts, organized by Center for Bhutan and GNH Studies. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to moderate this session. As Tsewang introduced, my name is Lungten Gyatso. I'm currently the president of the College of Language and Culture Studies. As Tsewang mentioned, today's is the third seminar in a series of seminars in which we will explore different applications of artificial intelligence, digital and deep learning technologies to the betterment of the world we live in. But what does artificial intelligence, which is popularly known, in brief by this AI, have to do with ancient texts? We are about to find out. To start a new initiative, we have invited a world-renowned personality whose ideas, experience, and wisdom can set off our series of exchanges with dynamism and profundity. So I am truly delighted and honored to welcome Mr. Élie Roux, technical lead at the Buddhist Digital Resource Centre, to explain to us how digital technologies are used to archive for posterity, organize, translate, and share ancient Buddhist texts. As a leading expert on the role of digitalization in the preservation of historic texts, Mr. Roux will discuss how the Buddhist Digital Resource Centre has used cutting-edge technologies to digitalize, catalog, and support the preservation and translation of ancient texts. Mr. Roux will also share with us details on the BUDA, the BUDA, BUDA platform he developed, the benefits of this cutting-edge digital platform and the demands it serves in cataloging historic texts. Mr. Élie Roux did his postgraduate studies at the Telecom Bretagne, one of the French grande école dedicated to engineering and technology. He joined BDRC in 2017 and was the architect and lead designer of our new state-of-the-art web platform called BUDA. He is also the main person at BRDC in charge of arranging data sharing agreements with digital libraries. Bhutan, like so many other places, has extensive historic texts, and as many of you will know, there are many activities here in Bhutan to conserve and digitalize our own collections. But it can be interesting to exchange experiences, not on the content and substance of the text, but on the way new technologies are used. We are delighted to welcome Mr. Roux and to learn from his experiences. We hope this discussion may consolidate our confidence in our own digitalization techniques or pinpoint technologies that are within our reach and whose use could further support the preservation of Bhutan's many historic texts so as they may be enjoyed by generations to come. So please know, Mr. Roux, that we truly, truly welcome your presence, and we are looking forward to your discourse this afternoon. The floor is yours, Mr. Roux.
Thank you very much. So first I can't share my screen, so I don't know who can allow me to do that.
Mr. Elie, can you try again, La? We will try to share the screen shortly now.
Okay, that works now. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so my presentation is titled Digitization of Ancient Texts by the Buddhist Digital Resource Centre, or BDRC for short. So first I'm going to introduce BDRC and our activity because they inform the way we think about the technology. And then I'm going to dive a little bit more in the new platform, the technology it's using and why it's using this technology and what are the benefits. So first, let me do that. Oops. Sorry. Okay, so let's keep it that way. So the best way to explain BDRC's activity even today is through the lens of the activity of our founder, Gene Smith. So Gene Smith was a very important actor in Buddhist studies and Tibetan studies, especially in between the 60s and the 80s, where he was the field manager for the Library of Congress in Delhi, India. And he had an activity where he would encourage and help Tibetan communities to reprint some of the very precious texts that they brought from Tibet. And so he was sending some reprints to some Western libraries and also distributing some reprints to Tibetan communities. And so this mission of preserving the text and making them more accessible by distributing them is still very much the core of our mission and our main motivation to digitize texts. And so TBRC was founded around 2000, at first with the goal to digitize Gene Smith's personal library. So over the years, he had accumulated quite a lot of rare volumes. And so the project started this way. And after some years, the project was done. And there was a decision to make about the future of TBRC. So one option would be to just wind down the activity, and because the mission was accomplished. And the other option was to expand the mission, but in quite a broad way, to expand it to other areas beside the Tibetan language area. And so in 2015, what used to be Tibetan Buddhist Resource Centre, or TBRC, became Buddhist Digital Resource Centre, BDRC. And so we expanded our mission outside of the Tibetan language area to Southeast Asia and East Asia. So I'm going to, so these two pictures, I'm going to describe first the four projects that we currently have of the four digitalization projects. So one is at the National Library of Mongolia, where we have a partnership with ACIP, where we digitized the Tibetan section of the National Library of Mongolia. So it represents about 60,000 volumes. So it's a very long-term project, but we already have digitized a few thousand, I think. And so that's one project. We also have a relatively large project in China, where we scan mostly Tibetan texts. And we have two projects in Southeast Asia. So one is in Thailand, where we are scanning the personal library of Peter Skillings, comprised of about 10,000 volumes of fragile palm leaves manuscripts. And so the fourth project is in Cambodia, where we are scanning also very fragile palm leaves texts. And so the picture on the left, so I don't know if you can see it well, but it's quite interesting about the digitization process, because we are not just taking pictures of the manuscripts, but we are also, we also need to apply some ink on the palm leaves and apply also some oil so that we can finally take some pictures. So the digitization process go a little bit beyond just taking pictures. It's also, there's a conservation part also that's important. And so you see that all our projects are in environments which are very stable with some lighting, etc., so that we can take the best pictures possible. And so just to give you an example, that's the pictures we take of the manuscripts in Cambodia. So that's, so these are the main projects by BDRC. So I think our main motivation is to digitize texts that are either in danger of being destroyed or degraded, or that are difficult to access. And especially in times of pandemic, where we are now, you can't, if you need a particular text that is somewhere in China, you can't just travel to China and read the text. So we need alternative ways to study and access the texts. And so just to give you a few numbers about the size of what we have. So we have 20 million images that we put online. They represent about 55,000 volumes. And we are adding about 1 million images per year. And so it represents, depending on the way you count, between 150 and 200,000 unique texts. And in our database, we have records for all the authors, translators, etc. of these texts, and it represents about 8,000 persons. So the size of our database really informs, the way we encoded it and the way we are thinking about it. Which leads to the BUDA platform. So BUDA stands for Buddhist Digital Archives. And so there is a beta version available on library.bdrc.io. So it's been in beta for quite a long time and it's quite stable. So we encourage you to use it instead of the old tbrc.org website. It's based on linked open data, which I'm going to describe a little bit in the next slides. We have a completely new bibliographical model that we are developing so that we can interact better with the standards in library science. We have a search engine, that's really state-of-the-art search engine that uses some NLP, etc., and that can search on Tibetan, Sanskrit, or English, and we are planning to add also Burmese and Khmer. And finally, we revamped our open access policy. So it has practical consequences in terms of technology also. We will see a bit later why, but basically our new policy is to advertise all the images of old texts as being in the public domain. So we don't claim any copyright on them, we don't restrict any kind of access. And we do the same with our data. So we used to claim a little bit of copyright on the data that we have. So it's not the case anymore, and we've put everything under the CC0 license. And I'm going to explain a bit why in future slides. So the core technology that we are using on BUDA is called linked open data. And in a way, it's really the basis for AI. Like, for instance, so I never actually tested that because I don't have that kind of device. But if you ask Alexa or this kind of tool, what's the birth date of, I don't know, Tsongkhapa is, for instance, the process by which it will give you the answer, if it does, is not by artificial thoughts. It's by looking at what we could call the global knowledge graph and finding who Tsongkhapa is and look at the properties and finding the birth date. So in many ways, linked open data, like this global knowledge graph, is really the basis of AI. It's the way AI gets its information. And so as you can read in linked open data, there's the word open, and it's quite fundamental in the technology itself to be able to sort of merge different data sets, to be able to allow data sets to communicate, to exchange some data, etc. All the data needs to be open. And so one also very strong aspect of linked open data is the connection through, of authority databases. So one example of such database is the Vaiof Database for authors, but so Vaiof is really a database where that is filled by all the national libraries in the world. So you pretty much have all the Western authors and a lot of the historical Asian authors too. And so by referring to this database, which is supposed to have all the persons who ever wrote something, then you can connect, because everyone is connecting to this database, then by connecting to it, you are also connecting to everyone in this knowledge graph. So I thought it would be useful to say a few words about how it looks like practically. And so one of the core aspects of linked data is to, in many cases, to replace names, like like Shiwala, for instance, by URIs for the person. So, like for instance, when you catalog a text, by like the Bodhicharya Avatara, and you, instead of writing the author as this Shiwala and writing it in Tibetan, what you do is refer to a person and not a name, and this person has a certain identifier, which in that case is a URI. So this is the actual identifier for Shantideva or Shiwala in our database, for instance. And so when you do that, you can then connect this identifier to an identifier in Vaiof, which can then connect you to, I don't know, Wikidata and all sorts of biographical databases. And so here's an example of a concrete, I don't know, user-facing benefit of doing that kind of things. So this is our record for Shantideva on BUDA, for Shiwala. And so when connecting to Vaiof, for instance, you see here we have this connection, and we also have a connection to WorldCat through Vaiof. And so if we click there, so WorldCat is also an authority database for all the publications. And so it's also filled by most national libraries. And so what you can see here is all the publications that have been cataloged by national libraries of texts that have been authored by Shantideva. And so you can find, so it's mostly translations in that case, but you can see you have translations in German, in English, in French, etc. So all the texts that have been cataloged by national libraries are accessible, just by connecting to this big knowledge graph. Another thing that you can see here is that we, through connecting to other databases, we are able to exchange some data with these databases. And so here we have this symbol here, the hand is for the DILA authority database. So DILA is the Dharma Drum Institute of Liberal Arts in Taiwan. And they have a very good database of also in linked data. And what we are doing here is, for instance, this information, these names, we don't have them in our BDRC database directly, but through the connection, through linked data, we are able to display them and also indicate the source of the statements. So these are things that we want to develop further, and that's really the core of the new platform in terms of database. So, but then in linked data, linked data doesn't provide a vocabulary for all the fields that you want to fill for a person, for a text, etc. It just allows you to define your own vocabulary. And so what we have been doing is define a vocabulary that we think is very suitable for Buddhist studies and Tibetan studies, and is also aligned with the main trends in library science. And so we call this vocabulary the Buddhist digital ontology. So ontology is a sort of linked data term to talk about a vocabulary. And so this vocabulary is open source, and we are very welcoming contributions, and we want as many people to use it. And we are so happy to help anyone who would like to use it. And so the goal is that it's a shared project, it doesn't need to be BDRC's vocabulary. We really want it to be cooperative projects. And so then I'm going to describe a little bit more the bibliographical model, because it's kind of the core part of the vocabulary and all the different fields that we have. So it's pretty similar to something called BibFrame 2. So BibFrame 2 is a linked open data vocabulary that's been created by the Library of Congress, but in collaboration with a lot of national libraries, and it's set to become the standard that probably will replace MARC in libraries. And so our new bibliographical model is really aligned with that. So it allows us to communicate better with the rest of the world. and it's easier to link from and to link to. One of the main things, though, it's valid for us and also for most of the national libraries, is that transitioning from, let's say, a more simple model like MARC to BibFrame2 takes a lot of time. So we have done, let's say, a first draft of that transition on BUDA, but it's still quite imperfect, and we still are working on it. So this bibliographical model is built in the following way. So the top level entity is called a work. So it's typically the text itself, but not talking about its physical representation. So you would have the topic, the author of the text, so all the properties that are valid all across the different versions of the text. So that's the work, but then below that you have an entity called the version. And so this version is really like the physical representation of the text in the sense that it has, or of the edition if you want. It has a scribe when it's a manuscript, or a printery if it's a woodblock, a publisher if it's a more modern publication, etc. So it's really like what you see, it's a particular version of the text, and a work can have multiple versions. Then in order to organize our scans, we have this entity called scans. And so we have information about who created the images, when, by which process, etc. And so what we are saying is that these scans are a reproduction of a particular version. Then we have what we call the e-text. So e-texts are like the Unicode text that you can copy paste, etc. And so they have also the same kind of property, who created them, with what process, etc. And they are also reproductions of some versions. And finally, you have something called the item. So the item is like the physical copy. So it's especially interesting when you have either a woodblock or modern publication, where you can have several physical copies. And so it's like one particular physical copy where it can have a shell mark, it has a physical location, etc. So these are the different entities that we are manipulating in our database. So, but a big part of the user engagement of the BDRC website is through reading the images, reading and accessing the images. And for that, we are using a protocol called IIIF. And so it may seem a little bit technical, but there are actually a lot of user-facing benefits from using that technology. And so the main, so IIIF is built on linked open data. It's kind of a subset or a vocabulary of linked open data, if you want. And it's really built with the same philosophy in mind, in the sense that when you are using IIIF, you can, all your images can be fully embedded into any other website. The norm is really made for that. And also you can embed in your website images from other IIIF providers. And so I'm going to show one example in each direction. So the screen grab you see here is from the website of the Dzongsa Khyentse Chokidadjo Institute in India. And they are using the BDRC images, but they are organizing it in their sort of own collection for their own use. And I don't know if you can see well, but here you can see Sheja, etc. So they are organizing our images in terms of the text that they are using in their curriculum. And so their students can just go on the website and look at the different texts that they want, organized in their own way. But the images are served by BDRC, but it's fully transparent. They don't really see that it's coming from BDRC. And an example in the other way around is the connection to the EAP collection. So EAP is the Endangered Archive Program. It's run by the British Library, and there are 4 Bhutanese collections that have been digitized by Karma Punto. And so here I'm gonna take an example of how it looks like. So here in this example, I'm searching, for this title on the platform, and there's only one hit, and you can see here that it has, this British Library logo. And so when you click in there, you can see you can see the images from the British Library. But BDRC doesn't have a copy of these images. They are just served on our website through IIIF. And so you can, find the records and find the images on other platforms thanks to this technology. And actually, I know that some scholars are making use of these images because they discovered them on our website, but they probably wouldn't have discovered them on the British Library website because it's not really a place where they are doing some research. So when they want to discover something, they go on the BUDA website. But thanks to this technology, we can promote text that are on other platforms where maybe our users wouldn't go. And that's a very important goal of the new platform. So in terms of collaboration with the EAP, for instance, we included 6 collections. So 1 Sanskrit collection, 4 Bhutanese collection, and 1 Chinese collection. So it represents in total, almost 4,000 texts, which is a significant addition to our database. We also have that kind of partnerships already available on our website with the Cambridge University Digital Library for some rare Sanskrit manuscripts, with also Internet Archive, who digitized a part of the Hodgson collection, so a very important collection of Sanskrit manuscripts. We also have the Waddell collection at the Stadtbibliothek zu Berlin, so the German National Library, and the Van Manen collection in Leiden. So all these are served through IIIF. And so that means that when you want to discover some texts, you just need to search them on BUDA, and you can find hits on many collections and many libraries. And so it's good for these different libraries because then their images are more used and discoverable. And it's also good for our users because they can discover more text than they wouldn't have if we didn't have that kind of technology. And finally, the main, truly AI feature of the platform is OCR. So we have a pipeline where we can send our images to Google Vision, so the Google OCR, and then we integrate the results in our platform. And so you can see, so this is an image of a very recent publication, and that's the output of the OCR from Google. So it's very useful, but it still comes with quite a lot of errors. I mean, for that kind of publication, it comes with relatively few errors, but for manuscripts that are, for which the images are not really good, or for which the scribe is not really good, it really has a lot of errors. And also for woodblocks, it's also not really reliable. So the good news, I think, for Bhutan is that you have a lot of very skilled scribes, and the manuscripts from Bhutan are usually very good calligraphy. And so if you have good images of them, I think the Google OCR will work pretty well. And so unlike also on tbrc.org, on the new website, we allow all the texts to be fully downloaded. We don't put any restriction on them. And but even though the texts have some errors, we don't really see these OCR texts as being ready to be published in a way, but we are keeping them in the database for to allow search. And we have some feedback from scholars, for instance, who discover a lot in this OCR. Even though the OCR is not really good, when you search something, there's still a good chance that you will find it. So it really allows a lot of research and discovering like mentions of a name of a person or a place in a text that you probably didn't know before, etc. So even though these texts are not fully ready to be published, they are still very useful for our users. And so in conclusion, so what happens after digitization? So this image is quite interesting. So we have this program where we put all our images on some hard drives, and the hard drives are then distributed all over Asia. And so here it's two of our staff members distributing a hard drive at the Bhutanese National Library. And so this is one of our program, something that we do with our images, and we obviously want as many people as possible to access them. And one way to sort of promote the scan and this digitization and promote the cultural heritage is, I think, through widespread dissemination and access, so that then the images can be studied and articles can be written about them, and this cultural heritage becomes more and more famous. So the image on the right is just an article by Shane Clark with very explicit title, Lost in Tibet, Found in Bhutan, about the specific features of a Vinaya text from the Bhutanese kangyurs. And so something I won't really dive in is the long-term preservation. And it's something that's really on our mind at BDRC, because even if you scan a lot and you have a good collection and it's accessible online, what happens if BDRC, I don't know, runs out of money, or if there's an accident or something like that. And so if BDRC disappears, we have two backups. So one is in Harvard. So they have a long-term preservation program where they, by contract, they will make all the images available for free online, if in case BDRC disappears. And we also have a backup at the Internet Archive. So all our images are there already, and they will remain there as long as Internet Archive exists. And so, yeah, this is something that's quite important, I think, in the digitization project, because even though once the images are created, they don't require a lot of maintenance. In the very long term, they still require some maintenance, because JPEGs will not be the sort of standard format forever. Probably in 100 years, nobody will read JPEG files. So we need a way to think about the very long term too. And so, in conclusion, I'm always happy to share my experience with this technology, and also to create some data sharing partnerships, or technical partnerships, or just any help. So if you want to get in touch with me, you have my email address here. And yeah, so that concludes my presentation. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I think we can move to Q&A.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roux. I hope whoever are attending this webinar seminar must have enjoyed this amazing presentation. It was really interesting to hear you talk about the numerous and fascinating initiatives and steps that you talked about, and the team at the Buddhist Digital Resource Centre, the amount of work that you have done in order to catalog and preserve ancient Buddhist texts, really interesting. I think BDRC, and then now in categorically the Buddha Digitization Archive, digital archive, has done a tremendous work, which has given humanity the opportunity to access to a time-tested knowledge system for all times to come. It's a huge contribution to humanity. And listening to you, and as we all know, this digitization, the work that you are doing is not just digitization, but also you talked about the practical link, open data, and then also it has an aspect of conservation of the text, and also making it available in other languages through translation. So it's very interesting to know that that you took us through this many intricate processes involved in making and digitalization of the scripts. It's not just scanning and then taking photographs, but involving much more than that. It was really interesting, and especially for Bhutan, who also we are people like Dr. Kamapunso have been working towards this. So I think it will be very useful to learn from you. Now, if participants in the Zoom meeting have any question, please raise your hand, your electronic hand rather, and put up your question into the Q&A chat, if there are any.
Yeah, I think there's a question from Françoise.
Yes, I wrote it, so maybe you can just, I'm sorry to be so stupid, but I didn't, what is OCR doing exactly?
So the OCR is like when we have the images of modern editions, we transform that into some text, which is available on the platform, and that is searchable. So when you search, in the search bar on BUDA, and you select e-text, you are looking inside the content of the text, and you can find a lot of hits, for when you search some information about a particular person, you put the name and you find some maybe hidden biographies or references. You're muted.
I was muted.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elie. And OCR stands for what exactly?
Oh, sorry. Optical character recognition.
Ah, okay. Okay. Thank you very much. It was really great. I mean, I really enjoyed. Thank you very much.
I think while people are, thinking of asking question, may I also, you said that TBRC, transited into becoming BDRC. I suppose, much of the Tibetan corpus, literature corpus would have been, digitized by now. And now you're moving also to other countries, South Asian countries, like you mentioned about Thailand and Myanmar and sort of countries. Are you digitalizing, still continuing the Tibetan literature simultaneously with with other countries, or are you doing it case by case? How is it? How that is being done? I think you are muted, Elie. You have to
Sorry.
run.
So
The time-
yeah, thank you very much for this question. I mean, it's a very important one because when we changed the name, some people thought that were sort of abandoning Tibetan language, etc. And that's not the case at all. You see in our 4 main digitization projects, 2 of them are about Tibetan texts. So the one in Mongolia, where we are scanning the Tibetan section of the library, and also one in China, where we are scanning quite a lot. And so where did I go with that? So even though we scan really a lot of Tibetan texts, there are still some texts that we are actively searching, that we know they exist somewhere because someone cataloged them, but we don't have them, and some scholars are asking us, could you find this text, etc. So there is still a lot to scan, I think. I mean, less and less, but still, some very important texts are yet to be discovered. And but yeah, we also, I didn't really talk about it, but we have some partnerships also in India with LTWA, the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, and also CHITS, the Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, who are providing us with some scans that we put online with their attribution, etc. So we are still very interested in forming partnerships about Tibetan literature. So, and we also have some modern publications. So they are under copyright, so we don't allow full access to the images. But there is a lot of scholarship, in China in Tibetan language, and also some modern literature that we also put on the website and that we digitize.
I think we have Pema Tsering raising hand. May you take the floor now?
Thank you, La. Mr. Roux, thank you for a fascinating discussion. And there's clearly BDRC is doing a lot of great work in preserving these texts for us, and I think making it accessible to so many people around the world. But particularly since you've just mentioned this idea of copyrights, a thought that came to me, and I'll sort of disclose that I am a lawyer. So I was just thinking, what is the ownership sort of structure around these digital images? Because particularly in Bhutan, most of these old scriptures are the property of, or have been for centuries, the property of temples, right? Old monasteries, and under the sort of caretakership of monks. Now, when there's projects for digitizing are being undertaken, creating digital images then creates a whole new asset in itself. And I see that they're being stored at the British Library and various other places. So what is the structure, where it lie insofar as the intellectual property of these digital images are concerned?
Yeah, thanks a lot for this question. It's also a very important one. And so there are really 2 different cases. So one case is the texts that have been written recently, which I think we can forget about. They're under copyright and they have some specific laws. But for ancient texts, so I've done some research about it and asked some lawyers, and I think I'm quite confident in saying that when you just reproduce a text that is in the public domain, the new asset that you are creating is also in the public domain. It's like copyright only applies when you are creating something new, in other words. So yeah, copyright is only with new creation and not reproduction of things that were pre-existing. And so that's at least my understanding of the copyright law. So our view is that a manuscript from the 13th century is not under copyright, even like the images that you reproduce from these manuscripts. You don't own the copyright on them because you didn't create something new. It's just a reproduction. So that's at least my understanding of the copyright law. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't sort of restrict like access to some images, etc. But it has to be by, I don't know, contract law, if you want, like that would be a US term, like, you in the terms of use of a website or something like that, You could say, please use these images in such and such way, but it wouldn't be inside the copyright law. That's at least my understanding of it.
Okay, sorry, no, I don't mean to monopolize the time, but I just wanted to sort of at least in Bio I'm thinking of where, say, and there was mention, I think, earlier of, the value of preserving digital images or creating digital images is in the unlikely but tragic event that, you lose the original. Say, like, there's a picture that, gets destroyed in a fire, and then that temple knows access to that, and say we want to retrieve it, right? The thought is to go and get the digital copy, but sometimes, and you're right to mention this can be a contract law issue as to, then the ownership is a valid thought. Copyright is not quite to look at here. It is really just ownership over the digital images, right? Because say the British Library has ownership of, let's say, the conjure from particular temple that, they digitized. It's the temple that now has to go and make a request to the British Library to gain access to the document, and British Library is the owner, they can refuse access for whatever reason, right? To me, that seems to be an absurd situation when the conjure is originally the property of the temple, right? But along the way, when the digital records are being created, because maybe people weren't aware of the ownership or the importance of the ownership structure, you might have a situation. I'm being very tragic here. This is thinking of the worst case scenario, but this is where sort of my thought process is going, and so I do want to sort of find out more about this subject, because that's where the ownership of that document is so important. Digital image, a new form in itself, and therefore the ownership is in I think the perfect world, someone who's digitizing it will make sure that the ownership remains with the true owners, the original owners of the document, right? But along the way, different interests come in, and there I have concerns as to where that ownership sits.
No, and you're totally right, and so that's part of why in our culture at BDRC we are redistributing everything that we are scanning, so that we, like the original owners of the manuscript, can have our most high definition images of what we scanned. And so this is very important for us, but it's more I don't know, a cultural thing than a legal thing, because especially if you're thinking in terms of copyright, because the copyright law doesn't really apply to all these texts. And I agree that for some institutions, and I mean, let's say the British Library, for instance, it might be an issue in some cases where they have ownership of some things that are questionable, let's say. But it's something that's also discussed a lot these days, with some talks about digitalization, etc. So I think the culture is evolving in the right direction. And we are doing really our best at BDRC to redistribute everything that we have. We don't keep anything for ourselves. We always redistribute everything.
I think the BDRC and the BUDA is doing exactly taking care of what Ma'am Pamtsering was expressing. I think giving access of this collective property to the people who deserve it. That's something different from the American library, I suppose. We have Mr. Daniel who won with the question. Daniel, can you ask the question? It's go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Hi, Elie. Again, really, really good stuff. The whole BUDA project, I think when it first got announced, everybody was super excited, like what's new in store for us, especially updating not just the visuals, but also the technicalities behind it. And I think in my own research, OCR has saved me years of scouring through text, and thank you for that. I was wondering if it would be a possibility, or maybe this was already discussed, that especially in terms of OCR, how much of like a community input if there's a possibility of that, let's say you throw out the raw data that you get from Google Vision, and then let's say I'm working on a UME manuscript anyway, and I already have let's say a huge chunk of somewhat all right OCR with a lot of mistakes, and then would have the ability to just go in and do some minor editing. Is that something that would be possible?
So it's not currently possible, but it's something that we really want to work on, and we are developing some tools to allow that, and not only for the OCR but also for the data itself. When you have some interesting note, you make some interesting discoveries about a person or a place, etc., that you would be able to annotate something by keeping your name on the note. So this is really that kind of crowdsourcing is really something that we want to develop, because there is a lot of demand for that. People are eager to contribute, and also we acknowledge our limitation in the sense that we have thousands and thousands of volumes of OCR, and we can't just go through all of them and fix everything. So that's that's really the way forward, and we are starting to develop tools. So they are not ready yet, but they're on the to-do list definitely.
Okay, well that's good news. Looking forward to that. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't see any other hands. I would rather ask Elie. You talked about this this digitization platform connecting to other national libraries. How has been your experience in getting responses from such national libraries when you try to interface with them?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and so first it kind of depends on where they are technologically, but most of them really are providing the images through IIIF. And so usually what happens is that, for instance, if you take the German National Library or the French National Library, their Tibetan texts are such a tiny portion of the text that they have, that we don't even they don't really care that we are using their images, etc., because that's very minimal. And so, but for the cases where we had some contacts with some people there, they were really happy that we are using their images, because one of the reasons why they are using these open technologies is that so that their images are more discoverable. And sometimes I think they feel also a bit, I don't know, sad for they had this Tibetan collection on their shelves, but nobody's ever coming to see it, especially in terms of pandemics. So it's just sitting there doing nothing. And so if they scan it and put it available online, that's also part of their mission. At least that's my experience with that interaction.
Thank you. I think we have another hand raised. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, Putugeniki Nati. Sorry, extremely sorry, because I may be wrong.
That's okay. Thank you so much.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did. Really good. So hi everyone. Hi Elie. Thank you so much for the amazing talk, and thank you so much for telling us all the amazing steps you've taken to continue on Dean Smith's really noble cause. I was just wondering whether you could sort of talk a little bit of how the pandemic has impacted your work and how you've managed to overcome all the challenges it's brought. Thank you so much.
So I think the pandemic impacted our works in two ways. One positive and one negative. I mean, one negative is obviously that the digitization work has been slowed down. When there's an outbreak in Ulaanbaatar or in Thailand, etc., then people can't work and they can't go in the office, etc. So that has been, and when you digitize, you really need to be there. You can't digitize sort of remotely. So that was an issue. But the other positive aspect is that people really realized, and that when they can't go to their university library, they really need to access the text anyways. And they know that we have some scans and they're on the copyright, etc. And so we are really trying to find some solutions to allow access to this material, especially the modern publications like modern scholarship that's made in China, available to scholars who would otherwise access it through their local library, but it's closed now. So that's really drove forward, the reflection on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Françoise Pomaré, her hands raised. I think you have to unmute.
Yeah. Hello, Elie. This again, it's me. Just a question regarding the Tunhuang digitalization project. Are you linked with them for the Tunhuang manuscript?
Yes and no. So we are in contact with them, and we are more than happy to help them, connect, like using this technology so that we can connect in terms of data together. Mm-hmm. But I didn't follow the latest developments. It seems to go in the right direction, and the website has been, I think, updated, or maybe it's in the process of being updated. But I don't think that they will be using these new technologies, so I'm not sure we will be able to share data. So, but actually, Burkhard may have more news about that than I do. But
so my follow-up is: do you have the text of Tunhuang of the French National Library or British National Library?
So the people we are in contact with are from the IDP, so they are in London, and they are mostly dealing with the London collection. But the text of the French National Library are actually already online and in IIIF, etc. So this is something that we could import. There is like some clerical work to do with the cataloging and finding the titles, etc. But in theory, the technology is already there for us to allow discoverability of this collection, but not of the others, because the IDP website is not really using this technology.
Thank you.
Here in Bhutan, Lungten Foundation, under the leadership of Dr. Kambapunso, has been digitalizing, the Bhutanese literature that are available within the country. What has been, how are these two interfacing with your project?
So it's mostly through EAP. In the sense that Lungten is working with the EAP at the British Library, and so the images that they're producing are available in IIIF on the EAP website, and so that's that's the way we are displaying them on BUDA. But we don't have any digitization partnership in Bhutan yet, at least. But if there was something, this is something we would be open to, let's say, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay, hope something will come up in the future, because there's a lot more to be done.
Yeah.
Is there any other who'd like to ask our speaker, or any comments people would like to make? Well, I suppose there are none. I think now we will bring this online seminar to an end, since there are not anybody raising hands. I don't see anybody raising hands. Thank you, Mr. Roux, for this inspirational presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
I think we had a very interesting this presentation from you. It was very useful, and I think there's many more to learn from what you have been and what BDRC has been doing, for many years now, over 20 years of, thing, and then contributing to humanity, this treasures. And this is going to stay forever. And I think this is a wonderful gift to humanity, I personally feel, because the content of what you are doing is of, invaluable treasure that the posterity will continue reaping benefit out of it. You have illuminated as well as impressed by the experience of the BDRC that you shared, and by your own evident commitment to using digital technologies in the service of preserving history, preserving human knowledge, so that it may be enjoyed by future generations to come. At the same time, we with this some level of enthusiasm, we live this seminar with greater enthusiasm and fresh ideas for charting out our paths in this area. We are grateful for your time, for this human and professional connection to you, for your interchange on the question and answer session that you have given very lucid response to the questions that were asked, and for the wonderful way in which you have enriched our seminar series on the use of artificial intelligence and innovative solutions to support ethical and good policies, which is the overall theme of the seminar. May I also remind our audience that these seminars will continue over the next couple of months, for 3 months at least, thanks to the leadership of Dr. Maura and the Center for Bhutan and GNH Studies. Our seminar next week at 2 p.m. is with Minister Maria Ohisalo, Minister of the Interior of Finland. Both Bhutan and Finland, although differing in size and key demographic characteristics, have been known across the world for their sustainable approach to good and ethical governance, valuing happiness and the sustainability of the environment within their approach to providing government services. Within her discussion, Minister Ohisalo will share Finland's experience on how technological tools may be used for governments to better serve their people while sustainably maintaining and protecting the environment. Please do register for this and the following seminars on the CBS Facebook or website or via Instagram. Once again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Roux and his entire team at the BDRC and BUDA initiative, and wish you all the best of luck. Now the formal talk and this broadcast have concluded, but this conversation will remain open for us to ponder and discuss in our mind space for many days and years to come. So we will see how we can make this seminar a starting point for many of us to go about making the time-tested knowledge system of humanity to make it accessible and available for the posterity. So with this, may I now thank everybody and bring close to this seminar session. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.